Decline of the pearling industry. The Japanese cultured pearl, initially regarded as a wonder and shown at expos and other fairs, started to be produced in commercial quantities in the late 1920s. The influx of inexpensive, high-quality pearls onto world markets took place alongside the economic impact of the Great Depression. The result on the Gulf's pearl markets was devastating. In 1929, 60 of Dubai's pearling boats. In 1907, there were 335 boats operating out of the port, stayed in port throughout the season. The complex system of financing that underpinned the pearling industry, the relationship between owners, pearl merchants, nakhudas, captains, divers, and pullers fell apart and left an increasingly large number of working men in the town facing destitution. In the 1930s, a record number of slaves approached the British agent seeking manumission, a reflection of the parlous state of the pearling fleet and its owners. British Empire, 19th-20th century. Zayed I, 1835-1909. Ottoman attempts to expand their sphere of influence into the Indian Ocean failed, and it was Portuguese expansion into the Indian Ocean in the early 16th century following Vasco da Gama's route of exploration that resulted in the sacking of many coastal towns by the Portuguese. Following this conflict, the Al-Qusaymi, a seafaring tribe based on the northern peninsula and Langa of the Iranian coast, dominated the waterways of the southern Gulf until the arrival of British ships, which came into conflict with incumbents. Thereafter, the region was known to the British as the Pirate Coast. As Al-Qusaymi to the British Jussaymi, riders based there harassed the shipping industry despite or perhaps because of British Navy patrols in the area in the 18th and 19th centuries. A number of conflicts took place, notably between 1809 and 1819. Persian Gulf Campaign of 1809. After years of incidents where British shipping had fall of the aggressive Al-Qusaymi, with the first incidents taking place under the rule of Sakr bin Rashid Al-Qusaymi in 1797, an expeditionary force embarked for Ras Al Khaimah in 1809, the Persian Gulf Campaign of 1809. The campaign led to the signing of a peace treaty agreement between the British and Hussein bin Rahman, the Al-Qusaymi leader. This broke down in 1815. Lorimer contends that after the dissolution of the agreement, the Al-Qusaymi now indulged in a carnival of maritime lawlessness to which even their own previous records presented no parallel. After an additional year of recurring attacks, at the end of 1818, Hassan bin Rahman made conciliatory overtures to Bombay and was sternly rejected. Naval resources commanded by the Al-Qusaymi during this period were estimated at around 60 large boats headquartered in Ras Al Khaimah, carrying from 80 to 300 men each, as well as 40 smaller vessels housed in other nearby ports. Persian Gulf Campaign of 1819 and General Maritime Treaty of 1820. In November 1819, the British embarked on an expedition against the Al-Qusaymi led by Major General William Curl Grant, voyaging to Ras Al Khaimah with a platoon of 3,000 soldiers supported by a number of warships including HMS Liverpool and Curley. The British extended an offer to Said bin Sultan of Muscat in which he would be made ruler of Pirate Coast if he agreed to assist the British in their expedition. Obligingly, he sent a force of 600 men and 2 ships. With the fall of Ras Al Khaimah and the final surrender of Thaya Fort, the British established a garrison in Ras Al Khaimah of 800 sepoys and artillery before visiting Jazira Al Hamra, which was found to be deserted. They went on to destroy the fortifications and larger vessels of al-Quwain, Ajman, Fasht, Sharjah, Abu Hail, and Dubai. 10 vessels that had taken shelter in Bahrain were also destroyed. As a consequence of the campaign, the next year a peace treaty was signed with all the sheikhs of the coastal communities, the General Maritime Treaty of 1820. The 1820 treaty was followed by the 1847 engagement to prohibit exportation of slaves from Africa on board of vessels belonging to Bahrain and to the Trucial States, and the allow right of search of April-May 1847. By this time, some of the smaller sheikdoms had been subsumed by their larger neighbors, and signatories were Sheikh Sultan bin Sakr of Ras Al Khaimah, Sheikh Maktoum of Dubai, Sheikh Abdulaziz of Ajman, Sheikh Abdullah bin Rashid of Amal Quwain, and Sheikh Said bin Tahnoun of Abu Dhabi. The treaty only granted protection to British vessels and did not prevent coastal wars between tribes. As a result, raids continued intermittently until 1835, when the sheikhs agreed not to engage in hostilities at the sea for a period of 1 year. The truce was renewed every year until 1853. Perpetual Maritime Truce. In 1853, the Perpetual Maritime Truce of 4 May 1853 prohibited any act of aggression at sea and was signed by Abdullah bin Rashid of Amal Quwain, Hamid bin Rashid of Ajman, Said bin Buti of Dubai, Said bin Tahnoun, chief of the Binyas, and Sultan bin Sakr, chief of the Josmis. A further engagement for the suppression of the slave trade was signed in 1856 and then in 1864, in additional article to the Maritime Truce providing for the protection of the telegraph line and stations dated 1864. An agreement regarding the treatment of absconding debtors followed in June 1879. Exclusive Agreement. Signed in 1892, the exclusive agreement bound the rulers not to enter into any agreement on or correspondence with any power other than the British government, and that without British assent they would not consent to the residence within my territory of the agent of any other government, and that they would not cede, sell, mortgage, or otherwise give for occupation any part of my territory save to the British government. In return, the British promised to protect the Trucial coast from all aggression by sea and to help in case of land attack. Trucial state affairs. Significantly, the treaties with the British were maritime in nature, and the Trucial rulers were free to manage their internal affairs, although they often brought the British and their naval firepower to bear on their frequent disputes. This was particularly the case where disputes involved indebtedness to British and Indian nationals. During the late 19th and early 20th century, a number of changes occurred to the status of various emirates. For instance, emirates such as Rams and Zia, now part of Ras Al Khaimah, were signatories to the original 1819 treaty, but not recognized by the British as trucial states in their own right, while the Emirate of Fujairah, today one of the 7 emirates that comprise the United Arab Emirates, was not recognized as a trucial state until 1952. Kalba, recognized as a trucial state by the British in 1936, is today part of the Emirate of Sharjah. Until 1930s, the British refrained from interfering in the internal affairs of the trucial sheikdoms as long as the peace was kept, in contrast to their policy in Oman, where they were concerned on maintaining stability of Amman's sultanate and were eager to maintain their airbase in Mashira Island. According to a British official, they could fight each other as much as they liked by land, and we did not hesitate to recognize a ruler who had acquired power by murder. The construction of an airport at Sharjah and the grant of oil concessions to an oil company forced us to modify this policy to some extent. Discovery of oil. In the 1930s, the first oil company teams carried out preliminary surveys. An onshore concession was granted to Petroleum Development Trucial Coast in 1939 and an offshore concession to the RC Exploration Ltd in 1952. Exploration concessions were limited to British companies only following to the conclusion of agreements with the trucial sheikhs and British government. Management of the Trucial Coast moved from the British government in Bombay to the Foreign Office in London in 1947 with Indian independence. The political resident in the Gulf headed the small team responsible for liaison with the Trucial sheikhs and was based in Bushehr until 1946, when his office was moved to Bahrain. Day-to-day management of affairs was carried out by the native agent, a port established with the 1820s Treaty and abolished in 1949. This agent was bolstered by a British political officer based in Sharjah from 1930s onward. Oil was discovered under an old pearling bed in the Persian Gulf Shaif in 1958 and in the desert at Murban in 1960. The first cargo of crude was exported from Jebel Khana in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi in 1962. As oil revenues increased, the ruler of Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, undertook a massive construction program, building schools, housing, hospitals, and roads. When Dubai's oil exports commenced in 1969, Sheikh Rashid bin Zayed Al Maktoum, the ruler of Dubai, was also able to use oil revenues to improve his people's quality of life. Bahraini dispute. In 1952, a group of some 80 Saudi Arabian guards, 40 of whom were armed, led by the Saudi Emir of Ras Tanura, Turki Abdullah, at Otashan, crossed Abu Dhabi territory and occupied Hamasa, one of 3 Omani villages in the oasis, claiming it as part of the eastern province of Saudi Arabia. The Sultan of Muscat and Imam of Amman gathered their forces to expel the Saudis, but were persuaded by the British government to exercise restraint pending attempts to settle the dispute by arbitration. A British military build-up took place, leading to the implementation of a standstill agreement and the referral of the dispute to an international arbitration tribunal. In 1955, arbitration proceedings began in Geneva, only to collapse when the British arbitrator Sir Reader Ballard objected to Saudi Arabian attempts to influence the tribunal and withdrew. A few weeks later, the Saudi part was forcibly ejected from Hamasa by the Trucial Oman leaves. The dispute was finally settled in 1974 by an agreement known as the Treaty of Jeddah between Sheikh Zayed, the president of the UAE, and King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. Independence and Union, 1960-1972. Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan was the first president of the United Arab Emirates and is recognized as the father of the nation. In the early 1960s, oil was discovered in Abu Dhabi, and even in an event that led to quick unification call made by UAE sheikdoms. Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan became ruler of Abu Dhabi in 1966, and the British started losing their oil investment and contracts to US oil companies. The British had earlier started a development office that helped in some small developments in the Emirates. The sheikhs of the Emirates then decided to form a council to coordinate matters between them and took over the development office. They formed the Trucial State Council and appointed Adi Bitar, Sheikh Rashid bin Zayed Al Maktoum, Sheikh Rashid bin Zayed Al Maktoum's legal advisor, as a Secretary General and legal advisor to the Council. The Council was terminated once the United Arab Emirates was formed. British withdrawal. By 1966, the British government had come to the conclusion that it could not longer afford to govern what is now the United Arab Emirates. Much deliberation took place in the British Parliament with a number of MPs, Member of Parliament, arguing that the Royal Navy would not be able to defend the crucial sheikdoms. Denis Healey, who at that time was the UK Secretary of State for Defence, reported that the British armed forces were severely overextended and in some respects dangerously under-equipped to defend the sheikdoms. On 16th January 1968, British Prime Minister Harold Wilson announced the decision to end the treaty relationships with the seven crucial sheikdoms, which had been together with Bahrain and Qatar under British protection. The British decision to withdraw was reaffirmed in March 1971 by Prime Minister Edward Heath. The region faced a host of serious local and regional problems. There were Iranian claims over Bahrain and other islands in the Gulf territorial dispute between Qatar and Bahrain over Zubaira and the Howard Islands, and the Buraimi dispute was still unresolved between Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, and Oman. On the issue of the Shah of Iran intentions, there are conflicting views. Abdullah Omran Tarayem states that Iran was contemplating the occupation of Bahrain and other islands in the Gulf, while Alwani Roham writes that the Shah had no intention of using force to resolve the Bahrain question and was seeking a package deal with Great Britain. Our Tunbi Islands and Abu Musa, which was refused. The ruler of the Emirates the rulers of the Emirates believed that Britain's continued presence constituted a real guarantee of the region's safety, and some genuinely wanted Britain not to withdraw. With this in mind, days after the British announcement to withdraw, Sheikh Zayed tried to persuade them to honor the protection treaties by offering to pay in full the cost of keeping British armed forces in the Emirates. However, the British Labour government rebuffed the offer.